be here. I will briefly explain what Zinneke is about for those who might not know what the project stands for. And then I'll try briefly to get to the core questions that Floortje gave us. So, in a shortcut, I always like to present the project of Zinneke as a project which is a city project on the one hand, but a social artistic city project trying to experiment in the art of creating shared spaces. So, very briefly, what we do is, and it's a project that started in 2000, so that means that we are heading our 20th anniversary next year. So I'm really very happy here as a very young baby in the heritage world. So what we do is we try to work in Brussels region, in the different neighborhoods, to connect inhabitants, different organizations, initiatives, and professional artists through a process of 1.5 years of work, and all that work ends up in one big parade during 2 hours in the city of Brussels every 2 years, with a lot of people coming to look at it, just to give you some idea on the scale we are working on. So it's a big bazaar, like some might say. What is important to us is when I mention that Zinneke is a city project, and it refers to the fact that for us, what the city stands for, who is living there, what are the problems we might have to cope with, social problems, geographical problems, cultural problems, or whatever, opportunities at the same time, are for us a starting point to see what kind of interesting connections we can make between people, between organizations and initiatives, between artists, topics that we grab, connections that we try to make between different municipalities, neighborhoods, territories, groups, communities, and so on and so on. So that means that for us, having a very good understanding of what is going on a daily basis, and you can imagine that every city, but especially a big cosmopolitan city, is changing really a lot. So for us, that's really an important work on a daily basis to keep in touch with what is going on in the different parts of Brussels. We are especially very sensitive to a lot of boundaries existing in Brussels, because Brussels is one of these cosmopolitan cities with an extreme richness when you look at the economic figures. But when you look at the population and the inhabitants, we see that Brussels is a very segmented city with about 30% of the people living under the poverty rate. I think it's important to have some ideas of, let's say, the ground we are working on. We have an extreme diversity with a population that has most than 50% non-Belgian origins, with a lot of young people, a lot of languages spoken, and of course a lot of boundaries to work on. What we are interested in is try to see how we can create bridges, liaisons, crossroads on these different type of boundaries existing in the city. I was talking about communities, I was talking about languages, but also when I'm zooming in to different organizations and initiatives in the city existing, different sectors: education, art, social workers, youth workers, big institutions, very informal networks, very visible, some very well known, and so on. All that is for us interesting material to try to work with and try to connect what is not connected on a daily basis. We do that through a process of 1.5 years. We take first a lot of time in trying to see what are senseful, you say that in English? Sense-making connections between different initiatives, between different organizations, between different actors, between inhabitants and artists, and then starts a process where we reflect on how are we going to invent a project together. And every group is really on measure, an in-depth work on first reflect on how method we are going to co-create a project. Of course, the artists are absolutely key people and persons in that process, and meaning also that at the end we want to get up to something that is a performance that is showing in the parade, but is really a project that is co-created, well, as much as possible from A to Z, and then you have all the possible variations between that and how to do it, to end up with something like a one-shot performance in the street of Brussels. So I mentioned a lot of words here, what might be quite complicated to use in the world of musea, and I'm getting back to these aspects afterwards. What we do with the parade, and I end here with a little presentation on Zinneke, is that we present our work in the street. So for us, public space is really, well, there where we feel best. We love workshops in open air, like Michel does. And with the parade, we try to re-engage in the street, not only physically, but also what that might raise more symbolic questions in what kind of expression, what kind of voices do we hear, what is represented, because it's not documented, but it's represented in the street as forms of expressions in all kinds. So, just a few essentials. If I get back to the questions that Floortje was raising. So what with Zinneke, we didn't really have collaborations with musea, even though we had some contacts already. There was at a certain stage about 2 years ago when the Museum of the History of Europe was working on his last thoughts on finishing the museum that opened last year. So it's quite new museum in Brussels. And at the end of the museum, physically, it's some kind of a ballade in the building, and at the end, on the top, there was a space, a few square meters that they left open for a connection with Brussels. And there they wanted to have us, with Zinneke, reflect on how we could, in one way or another, have something mentioning and referring to, well, all these kind of explorations on how to make a city together, how we make society together through diversity, and how this ongoing on a daily basis process can in one way or another be represented in the museum. And they thought that Zinneke might be a good levier to have that idea imagined and represented in the museum. What happened is that we met, we had a lot of enthusiasm from both sides, but at the end, well, we just met once in a real, well, let's say, hours during meeting. And then afterwards, we, with Zinneke, thought a bit of what could be the good idea with the proposal. The proposal was not a good proposal, and so nothing happened. And they were right that it was not a good proposal, because in fact, one of the things that is quite clear for me, and that's why I'm really very glad to be here today, was that one of the things that we with Zinneke team never had the time to do is to write and analyze our project from that cultural heritage perspective. Even though we are working in the forms and the method that we use, because I heard in some of the stories a lot of things that are linked, and apart from that, it's a topic that interests me from my background also a lot. But I never had the time in the work with Zinneke to really make an analysis and do a transcription of that part of what Zinneke stands for. And even more, we just don't know that we are museumable, let's say. So I would say first lesson for me is very clear. Just tell organizations, initiatives and so on that they might be well, part of cultural heritage, and just tell us that we could do something together in the context of a museum, because we don't think of it. And then, well, I was thinking that everybody would say the same things, but there I'm going to give some feedback from our side that is quite obvious. We just don't have the time or the money, not the competences to reflect on how to document, to reinvent and analyze what parts of what we do might be interesting to connect to a museum context or topic. So that is well, let's say a very clear conclusion from our side. But if we look at some of the experiences that we had, and I gave one example with the Museum of the History of Europe. What looks important to me is that we go for the same kind of approach that we have if we want to do something together with Museum. That is to go for a real co-creation process. That means taking time to get to know each other, try to figure out what might be a common ground that we might, in a sensible way, to work on, to work from there on the method, on the program, and in order to make it a common project. And also, and that's of course the Zinneke touch, to always from the very beginning reflect on why do we do what we do, who are we doing it for, and who are we doing it with. And for us, indeed, it's always very important to connect with the inhabitants and the people that are, well, let's say, the core of the stories that we try to in a symbolic way, in a performance, artistic way, yes, but that are in fact the stories that we are trying to bring in public space. So in terms of suggestions, I think that the aspect, I'm just going to point out a couple of things and then I'm nearly finished. The things that I didn't hear before, because I'm absolutely agreeing that it's important to develop some toolkits that really might help. To just give a better understanding on a grid line, let's say, for analyzing what is the potential of what you have as an organization. Second aspect is time. Really give time to develop things. 3, do it in an integrated, transversal, intersectorial way. That's also things that I heard before. And then I heard somebody talking about leaving the voids and unplanned approaches as well. And that is one of the things that I would consider to be a very important aspect to the policymakers, where most of the time we're asked to have a plan and concrete results. And well, I always refuse to do so. What we do with Zinneke is we explain the method, but we never know what is getting out of it. And I think it's really a very important and a very interesting approach. And then a last sentence on well, the scheme of the questions that were raised. I think there is a third aspect that is quite important. There we have the museum as institutions or as practice. At one hand, we have the policymakers at the other hand, and I think we don't have to underestimate as actors, civil society, and I heard it in the story in the beginning. That is one of the recommendations, to work with civil society, with the communities, and so on. And I'm very quite constructivist in my way of acting in the world. I think we don't have to underestimate how local actors are instituators themselves. So I would say it's not only about state and nation state as the framework and the reference for this kind of experiments we would like to stimulate. But it's also thinking about how it's community-based and working with and from the basis of the people. So in fact, well, I'm just pleading for what is said on the first slide. Let's look for how to create shared spaces. Voilà.